Well, good morning all councillors, staff, media and our submitters. We're about to start the hearing process for our long-term plan. We're starting there. We're going to finish at 8 o'clock tonight, so we've got a big day ahead of us, but that's all right. We need to listen to what the people have presented on their submissions, so for clarification, so we're going to get into that very shortly when our first submitter comes on. The first submitter is via Zoom, who is Sir Don McKinnon from the New Zealand War Memorial Museum. Do you know if he's trying to connect? Doesn't look like it. Shall we keep you trying to connect, and we might have our friends at the back, the Tumanu Pāiao people, come up and present if you're ready to present your submission. So if you'd like to come forward, please. Councillors, page 109 and 445. Welcome, and nice to see you again. You did come and visit me at the office, and I said time to present your case is here, and you've done that to our long-term plan, so welcome. And we have your submission in front of us. Have you just got some additional papers? So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Your Excellency, the collective of respected members of the councillors, I'd like to say talofa, tulona, tulolavale, paia mamalule, malaine, your sacred place. It's an honour, and it's been so much appreciated to be here today, especially in God's will. It's a dream prayer for a long term of this organisation I'm here with to represent. As been through many and many consultation, we give this day to the Lord for bringing us all together, not only just the side of councillors and Your Excellency, even my congregation of the Christian Church of all Samoans in Ashburton, the soil where we are standing now since day one. We thank you for accepting a submission that was never thought it would accept it. After so many advices and so many consultation in the past, I'd like to say, thank you, Lord. We have failed before, but we have made it to a number one supporters, the councillors of Ashburton, to be here for the long term. If I may say, I'm here to ask, humbly request your assistance. We know that Ashburton has been a multicultural place since we started, and the establishment of CCCS Samoan has been a dream for a long time for our kaumātua back home, and even the one in the regional, as well as the whole of New Zealand. And that's what these people, as you can see, they walk in life with so much in their hearts to start something. That's always a fail. That's always a search. But we wanted to make sure if we can reach today and have a witness person like myself to ask and voice this, if you could please grant us. I have a constitution with me, and this constitution relays everything. It was being proposed and has been admitted by the people of Samoa and Ashburton more than 10 years. And as I spoke before, we still have our hearts in this land to feel that we can manage by your help in assisting in all terms of what we are asking. we pick up something from the mailbox, and that's where we are here today. As soon as got told and being advised, look for someone who could help. And that's where I asked Neil. From the bottom of our hearts, I'd like to say thank you very much to the councillors who are accepting this. Therefore, if you have any questions, it's laid in front of you what I've actually proposed to you and actually submitted from the bottom of our hearts. As mentioned earlier, we failed. But this is the only councils that we're referring to help us in the long run. We've done so much for this council, we've done so much for Ashburton, but we don't know if you could accept us to have a purchase land or have a space in where we are gathering now. We are using the pavilion hall. If you would like to give us more help in the long run, or even offering us a land where the domain so we could use under your supervision, we would accept it in all due respect. We will look after it. It's not for just us, it's for any multicultural people who we walk alongside in the long run. We have noted this so many times in our proposals to many other agencies, and even what I have spoken with the advisors, even Neil, this is what we wanted. If you could please grant us, and I'm pleading on behalf of my people behind me, this is why I'm here today. We know, as in the gospel, Roman City wasn't prepared and built in one day, but we look forward to hands in hands together in the long run with the councils of Ashburton. If you could please grant us a land or even a space where we could manage and started what we are doing right now. I can't name much, but God knows. We are being behind your back. In any events you have, we come up to support and to hold hands onto hands. Make sure it happens in reality. This is our request that has been put heavily emphasized in the past. And we ask God, thank you for bringing us today. That's all I'm saying. And I have the constitution on me for the mayor and a few bits and pieces with all the people's name on it. I'm mentioning the name right, the community leaders who are involved with this request.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. And the Samoan community is an important part of our community as well. So if we can assist, we will try. But at the moment, you're using the hockey pavilion on the domain for your services, which is working okay at the moment. But you would like your own place going forward for multicultural use. Yeah.
Yep.
So I have questions, councillors. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Good morning. Just one question. Would the land need to be within Ashburton, or could it be sort of out in the smaller towns? Would you want something that was reasonably close so that everyone could get to within Ashburton?
Whatever you've given us, whatever you would given us, we would appreciate. Even if roundabout near Fairton or anywhere around in town, we would accept it.
Okay, and can I have one other question? And would you fundraise to build a building on this land? Is that something that you would look at doing, or?
As I mentioned earlier, we have been doing a lot of work, fundraising and that, and we're being abused at the same time. May I cordially say this? We've lost quite a few money from fundraising because of what we applied for and didn't get it.
Oh, okay.
Because of the, but we would love to do that.
Okay, thank you.
More of that, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Welcome to the meeting. I've got a question. Have you tried to liaise with any of the other religions? I know St James at Timberwold have got a hall and a church that's only used about once a month. St Stephen's, the Methodist church, are going to have quite a big church without a very big congregation. Have you ever talked to other Protestant religions to see if you could use perhaps their building on a fairly long-term basis? Because I know the congregation have got St Paul's and Timberwold, and perhaps St Andrews. They've got 3 buildings with only one congregation. The question is, have you talked to other religions to see if you could take over one of their buildings, including the hall?
I won't add anything, but as being asked before, we have tried. We've used some of the premises as well in the past, and we've been told it's being disapproved from engineers for using it. But landing we are seeking is we wanted to buy. We wanted to own it for long term. We wanted to make sure if councils can prevent us by having a resource consent management over our authority, we would also like to take that on board if it may be granted. But we have asked your question, sir. We have asked the Presbyterian people, but we know there can be difficulties with the domain because it's under your legal advice. Yeah. Assistance or guidance or ownership with him. But we have asked.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your submission. We'll deliberate next week and we'll come back to you shortly after that with how we can assist, if we can assist. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think I saw Sir Don McKinnon coming in. Councillors, page 435. Welcome, Sir Don, to the Ashburton District Council's long-term plan. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very clearly, yes.
Great. If you'd like to just run through your submission and then we'll take questions.
Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate the time you've given me, and I'm certainly very much aware that seeking support for a project on the other side of the world is not the easiest thing in this particular climate. But I do thank those that are involved in it now. The first question is obviously, why are we doing this? You're well aware, of course, that many New Zealanders travel to Europe and do want to see those sites of World War I. But whereabouts do you hear the New Zealand story? Well, you don't go to the Australian Museum or the Canadian Museum or the British Museum, the American Museum, the Indian one, or even the South African one. The simple reason is that in the 1920s we never built a facility which we could call a home for New Zealanders to hear that New Zealand story. Yes, we're about 100 years late, but not too late to think about the next generation. So that's where we are. My second point is on the financial side. We are hoping to raise 15 million. Currently, from private individuals, philanthropic trusts, we've raised nearly 9 million. I'm pretty happy about that, but it's still some distance to go. By coming to local authorities, of course, we are hopefully saying this kind of can spread the cost across New Zealand. About 10 local authorities have made a submission to us and given us money, anything from 10 cents per citizen to $1, 20 cents per citizen. So we hope that you can possibly look at a target of $1 per citizen over a 3-year period. The third point is Ashburton itself. Well, I did work in Methven some years ago, and I was very conscious of those war memorials up in that part of Canterbury, signifying all of those young men who just picked up and went to the other side of the world. And as many know, when their parents saw them off, they actually did think they would come home. They didn't think they'd just be a name on a war memorial. So where we are today, in this little town of Lurkenwa, which still reveres what New Zealand did in that town 102 years ago, we believe we owe it to our soldiers who died on the Western Front and to the people of Lurkenwa to have more than just a plaque on the wall. And as I said to the Mayor of Lurkenwa just recently, we hope we can do better in the second 100 years than what we did in the first 100 years. So that's really just a synopsis of, in addition to what you've probably got in front of you on the submission we sent to you. Thank you very much, Your Worship and Honourable Councillors.
Thank you, Sir Don, for your submission. We'll go around for questions now. Councillors, any questions? The request of $1 per person doesn't seem to me to be out of the way, but we'll decide. Councillor Floon.
Yeah, you say that you're looking for about 15 or 16 million dollars, and you've got about 8 or 9 so far, which is a good effort. But the question I have is, how fixed is that cost of 15 or 16 million dollars? Is that based upon tenders or quantity surveyors, or, as I say, is that only a beginning point and it could end up at 20, or what?
Well, I wouldn't like to say we could hold it at 15, simply because those were based on 2017 figures by a quantity surveyor. So the assessment of the work is pretty accurate. The cost of the work would be something that would probably escalate. However, our job is to cut our cloth according to what we've got. And if we get to the 15 million and it gives us less of what we want, we will still make it work. It won't be a lost cause. The museum part of it may be slightly diminished, but there will still be a significant place for New Zealanders there.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Morning, Sir Don. It seems to me it's a bit disappointing if our government hasn't supported you in a major way. Have you approached them, or have they declined, or what's the position there?
Well, it's quite a long story, but the government's been declining to do something like this since about 1923. New Zealand was asked to contribute to the Passchendaele Memorial. They said no. The Menin Gate Memorial, they said no. Messines, they said no. So what New Zealand has got on the Western Front, 12,500 graves and a number of just monuments. So yes, it's been a no all the way along the line. However, I'm pleased that the government, as of last year, allowed by legislation a tax rebate for New Zealand donors. That was much appreciated and certainly means a lot to big donors. I think I could say confidently to you folk there in Ashburton that when this place starts to really move, it'll be very hard for the government not to be a participant.
Great. Thank you very much, Sir Don. There's no more questions. Very good submission. We'll deliberate in the next couple of weeks and we'll come back to you with an answer. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Good day. Oh, right. Okay. Thanks. And next up we have Peter Lua. Peter, welcome from the Mount Somers Holiday Park. And councillors, his submission is on page 421. And regarding affordable housing. Welcome, Peter.
Kia ora koutou. Nā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ti te nei whare. Talofa lava, mahalo le sui forma langi mā. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Worship Man Neil Brown and the Deputy Liz. Liz McMillan. And the CEO Hamish, and elected and appointed public servants as well. So first of all, I'd just like to say that, it was really an opportunity to come here and reinforce, I guess, our submission, particularly around affordable housing. But firstly, I'd like to say that and acknowledge the work that the council have done on pulling together this 10-year plan. I think it's a real credit to the council that they've been able to pull together a front-end strategy that has a clear focus and a direction around what it wants to do over the next 10 years. I understand the principles that sit behind those four focus areas, but I guess where we were coming from when we were thinking about affordable housing is that we don't see that coming through the 10-year plan. We don't see that in the actions. We don't see that in the deliverables over the next 10 years. And so I guess that's why we just really wanted to, I guess, reinforce the submission about, what role does council have around ensuring that there is some form of affordable housing. I'm not saying that it's the role of council to start building houses, no, but there are other mechanisms and levers in place that are at the council's disposal to be able to allow other people to, or consenting process to be able to allow people to think about dwellings and think about how they might want to do subdivisions. In the area where we live in Mount Somers, we've been fortunate to be in Mount Somers for about 18 months. We've moved there recently from Wellington, and so the reasons we decided to move to Mount Somers is we wanted to spend more time with our children, we wanted the lifestyle, and we've been lucky that we've been able to have that. Owning a small business, now my previous background is in the public sector for over 20 years. Coming into a small business like the holiday park, we see people and have been able to be involved in the community, and so it has been able to open my eyes into how what the decisions we do at a policy level influences those on the ground or at grassroots. Every week we get someone coming up to us asking if we have long-term accommodation because they're looking at employment in the area. There is no accommodation available in the whole of Mount Somers, and so they're coming to us. We're seeing subdivisions happening in Mount Somers, and it's really good to see that there is some parcels being unlocked and developed. But you're building, there are 6 sections. Each section is 2 hectares. Each of those hectares, each of those subdivisions have covenants that you can only build 1 dwelling on it. What value does that add to a community like Mount Somers? And so that's something that we're quite passionate about, is understanding what role does council have, not only just over the next 10 years, but what do we have over the next 35 to 40 to 50 years to be able to make it sustainable, to be able to make it equitable, to be able to make it future-proofed. So basically that's pretty much it, and really open up to questions and dialogue.
Thanks very much, Peter. Questions, councillors? Also in your submission you took freedom camping and you wanted a short-term ban at a couple of places.
Yeah, well, when the council presented on the long-term plan, they talked about some of the work that they're doing in the Mount Somers area. One of the 2 of the things that they're looking at doing is building facilities at the Boyers Stream, and in addition to that, they're looking at putting in some or upgrading the public toilets at the Domain. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that you're investing both in the Freedom camping site and the Domain camping site if you're wanting people to use the Domain camping site. We're right next to the Domain campground, and so we want to see people coming into the village so that they can go to the tavern, they can go to the restaurants, to the motels, and use the other business opportunities in the village. So yeah, that was kind of more where we were coming from.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Peter. Is it the council's job, or is it what commercially happens? Subdividers, if they're developing sections, they develop those that will sell. I live on Tarbottons Road, and there must be 35 sections that are sort of from about 500 to 1,100 square metres. There's a big block at Methven. We've got Racecourse Road. There's lots, I feel, do you not feel in this district with flat land, there's heaps of sections available in a variation of sizes, and that, is it council's job or is it what people want to buy that actually subdividers provide?
Yeah, well, council will also have the opportunity when they're consenting to say, look, is this in the best interest? Where is the public-private good around when we're consenting 7 2-hectare blocks? I think there is a role for council to think about what kind of community, what kind of community they want to be in this area, in this district. And so there is, I think, an opportunity to have kind of like, you know, private interest. But I think if there was an opportunity there to be able to say, look, is there some mixed modelling that you can do, as well as having 2 or 3 or 4 2-hectare blocks, but you can think about having 4 1-hectare blocks or 8 one acre blocks as part of that subdivision, then you're actually allowing people of all walks of life to be able to afford that dream of home ownership.
Great. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. Good morning. Just a question on the freedom camping. What are your ideas around a short-term ban? Are you thinking a couple of months over the summer, or what? Can you just tell me your ideas on that, please?
Yeah, I'm thinking more a couple of months over winter. As I mentioned, we've been here for only 18 months, so we don't know the area as well as you guys, but with COVID-19, it did put a bit of a spanner in our plans around what we were going to do in the area, and so we have had to pivot a little bit around how we market ourselves, and so we have been marketing ourselves to a ski season. But again, like other areas like Queenstown, other districts, councils are re-looking at what the role that freedom camping plays. And I know that through the Freedom Camping Act 2011, there was a specific purpose around what freedom camping was able to provide. And it's just about, just rechecking whether there is still value in having that, and what value does it bring to this district. Because a lot of people that we see camping in Boyers Stream do not come into the district at all, whether it's Ashburton or Methven. They just use it as a pit stop through to Tekapō and onto Timaru and other areas.
Councillor Lovett?
I was just going to ask, I'm a freedom camper, but have you ever done surveys at the camping ground of the people that you do get in to see, because I know a lot of freedom camping, they will spend a couple of nights out and then they go into a camping ground if it has got really good facilities.
Yeah.
So do you do surveys to see where they're coming from and what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the MCAA members do a lot of freedom camping, and they will come in to recharge, but they don't often go down to the Boyers Stream. They'll either go up to Lake Clearwater and freedom camp up there, and then come down for $5 showers and to recharge their batteries. But the ones that we do see, there are still the small slider vans, and they're the ones that I'm kind of more that don't really add any value. The ones that you're thinking of, they do stay down at Boyers Stream. They will come in to go to Strankruby for a meal on a Friday night, and so there is no issue with that. They are contributing to our district's economy, but it is the other ones that kind of tend to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you understand.
Yeah, so thanks for that, for your submission, Peter, and the section sizes, it might be a district plan issue, but we've taken it on board, we're listening, so we'll come back to you after we've deliberated and let you know how we get on. So thanks very much for your submission. Well done.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, councillors, is Philip Crozier. I see Philip there. Welcome, Philip. And page 142 is his submission. It's regarding the bridge.
That's right. Good morning, everybody, and I think I know most of you, and you've got a great day ahead of you, or a long day, I should say, ahead of you, and I shouldn't keep you long. but I'm here on behalf of the Scouts regarding the bridge right outside our lovely park, and excuse me, and Brian Mitchell's going to add to it tomorrow, I think, and Paul Jessup, our chairman, he's written a very good submission, and but not able to be here today. But I've been in scouting for over 30 years, and lived in this county all my life, and regard the bridge outside our very tranquil park, trying to get kids to sleep with traffic roaring past would be a bit of a nightmare, and with the nor'westers blowing the fumes right down into the tents, it would be hardly cricket. Now the park, since it's about 10 years old, and is over $1 million building, and it's being used every day. There's virtually on average 100 cars going in and out, picking up kids, maybe 50 going in and 50 coming out, but twice. And the wheelchair people are getting more and more people, and they use it during the week, and then most nights it's being used for scouting and guiding, which run from the park. And the weekends, there's hardly a weekend you can actually book in, because other people use it for a weekend, even weddings and different things, and the SARS people. So, but what I really came here for was to right a wrong. I gave a submission last time, and I think I said what I wanted to say, but in the media only about a year ago, it's said that the Scouts were quite happy about the bridge being on Chalmers Ave, or resigned to the fact. Well, that is not true. We don't want the bridge outside our park. And I put my glasses on. I think the submission that Paul's put in is better than what I can say, but I think that, just so you know, my view is the bridge, everyone wants a new bridge, but I don't think even going through the centre is long-term a good idea. And so 4.5 k's out on the downward side, a proper bridge that the whole community can use agriculturally, because that's where all the big traffic is. And the things that well, I'm actually confident that the council will make the right decision given all the right facts. And the two things that annoy me the most of the last vote, it was just about a split vote, and I think the chairman had to make the casting vote, and a good friend of my councillor, he, in my view, was bullied into not voting because he had a conflict of interest. Now, so even then it was a split vote. And the other thing I heard at the intermediate meeting the other day from a very prominent person was that the costings were not apples for apples. So in other words, the bridge itself was costed from Chalmers Ave to Timberwold, I don't know how far into Timberwold, about 1 kilometre. The other costings was Racecourse Road to the old sale yards, which is 6 kilometres, and the other cost from Drumore to Winslow is 22 kilometres. So naturally the longest one was going to be far the greatest in cost. So I don't know all the facts, and I just hope the councillors look at the facts, get them right, and make the right decision. So if there's any questions, I'll be only happy to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip, for that presentation. If the bridge goes where we have designated for it to go, then there needs to be good road alignment in consultation with the Scouts to get the entry and exit right, if it goes where, at that Chalmers Ave spot. So we'll go to questions. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Philip. On a good submission. Basically, what you're advocating is that we have a ring road around the outside of Ashburton, and what you say we're 4 kilometres out of town where all the business expansion is. By that, I take it that you're meaning the north developments in the northeast industrial estate out there, are you?
Yes, but I'm really thinking of the what I call five-star beef and meat packers, but it's not meat packers now. But there's a lot of silage and veggies being grown in that area, and there's huge truckloads of stuff being moved through Ashburton, which wouldn't even come near it, and of course all the milk tankers as well.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you, and thank you for your submission, Philip. Just going back to the entrance into the Scout Den, were any workable solutions ever offered because of the height of the road going past?
That's right. It may have improved since then because the first bump that when you go over it coming into Manuroto is the old sewage pipe. Now that may be able to be disused. I don't know if it's being planned. But then there's an embankment, and then to get up the rise to over the embankment is over 2 metres high. We actually thought, it's over 2 metres high. So at our gateway, we actually thought it was going to be 2 metres high, which would be sliding off and getting in under our $20,000 gateway, and there would hardly be room. And then getting out, we would want an underpass of the bridge so that we can get up the other side. And that, we have containers going on there, out of there, on the back of a truck. So it has to be very high. And so it has to be, the gateway has been made bigger recently, and that was over $20,000. And it got knocked down by a digger on the back of a truck. So we don't want to knock your bridge down.
Thank you. Thank you.
If a loop ring road was on the cards, who do you think should pay for it?
Well, that's just it, not the council. I've got it in here that we should be trying to get Transport New Zealand to actually fund the ring road, and they may be more interested in it, but that may be further down the track. So the short term, I'm not 100% sure how you handle it.
Thank you. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Philip, thank you for your submission. Apart from your comments about the noise and perhaps fumes and whatnot, I get the impression your main objection is the entrance and exit from the park if this bridge went in. Is that, am I correct in that?
The physical one, yes.
That's the main objection you have at this moment.
And the amount of people coming in and out of there, we think it's physically, and we park, when we have an event there, we park on the side of the road. We're exactly where the bridge is going to be. So 100 cars on the bridge would look good, wouldn't it?
Thank you.
But there'd have to be a lot of room made available to us.
Thank you, Philip, for your presentation. We'll come back to you in due course once we've deliberated. Thanks very much. Well done.
You've got a long day ahead of you, I can see.
We have. For the councillors, next up we have Kylie Hull, and zooming in from Te Urunranga Awhenua. And councillors, that submission is on page 583. Kia ora, Kylie. Can you hear us okay? Kia ora, Kylie. Can you hear us okay? No. Can you receive us, Kylie?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You can, yep, good. We're on board. Welcome to the long-term plan submissions, and we have your submission in front of us. Would you like to add anything more to it?
I don't believe so. I'm happy to take the submission as being read and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, questions, councillors. We go straight to questions. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kylie. Is it your organisation's position that the water should stay in the river or be in water races? Is my first question. And man-made water races. I draw the distinction.
I have been working with Carl Russell on stock water races and the closure of certain stock water races. We're just concerned that through the whole, between the Rangitata and the Rakaia, there's a huge network of water races. Through those races, we don't actually know what is there anymore. Traditionally, fish screens haven't worked, so we don't know in terms of what fish species are there, what in terms of native invertebrates and all those sorts of species have actually got into those streams. So through the closure of some of those stock water races, we need to actually have a bit more of a closer look at what is actually in there. Whether we can actually take what is in some of those races and put them back into rivers, or until we know what's actually, because nobody has actually looked at those races in terms of what's there. We may need to relocate some of those species if they have become established there. So there's just a bit of, and maybe it's a matter of that Ashburton and Runanga and the main 3 irrigation schemes that use those races, that we get together and actually do some sort of monitoring to find out what's there. Yeah. I think there just needs to be a bit more awareness of what is actually in terms of biodiversity.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, can I have supplementary?
Councillor Mackay.
Kylie, is it our whenua's aim to have water races, man-made water races running through the Ashburton District Council area, or that water to stay in the river as a long-term aim?
Runanga would always like to see that water stay in the river. The Hakateri is in dire straits. The Rangitata is in dire straits in terms of water flows and contaminants, and those flows are just, are they sufficient? Yeah. What about the Rakaia? I know there are water conservation orders on a couple of those rivers, but those rivers are in dire straits in terms of health. So there would be a desire to keep as much water in the river as possible. However, we do realise the use of that stock water.
Thank you. Kylie, I've just got a question around your submission with relationship with our whenua, and staff and yourselves meet with AEC every 6 weeks. Do you think governance should be attending those meetings as well?
I have to admit that AEC, on behalf of Runanga, have a fantastic relationship with those staff that we meet with. We meet with those management staff regularly. We do have a great relationship, and it's a very open relationship. But there is a lack of a relationship at the councillor level. We don't have that same relationship, and that's perhaps something that we need to work with.
Yeah, I take your point, and we will work on that to get a better outcome. And it may be, we will deliberate, and we'll come up with a plan around that, which because we value that relationship and want to improve it if we need to. Councillors, any other questions? Doesn't look like it. So thanks very much, Kylie, for your presentation. After we've deliberated, we'll come back with the outcomes for you. Thanks very much. Well done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. 10:55, next we have Federated Farmers. Lionel Hughes? Not here, we've got Dave Saunders. Fed Farmers is not here yet. Dave Saunders, would you like to come forward and present your submission? And councillors, page 510.
Caught me unprepared for a few minutes.
Oh, sorry, Dave, but we sprung it on you.
That's all right.
We've got a few minutes anyway, so just take your time and
Get we use up some of those minutes too, I think. Looking for find everything. Right. I think most of you know or heard of me, I guess. I've been around in one or two of the debates over the years. Yes, now going through things, water is obviously, you see what my views are on that. I questioned whether it was a mistake in the pamphlet. Somewhere around about 50% losses were indicated. That seems horrendous, so I hope that was a mistake. But obviously there's aged pipes in the system, and one would hope that council will have some records on some of those. And at the end of the day, I think water meters are a must. The country's going to be short of water one day. We can tell by the levels of the lakes are in their lowest conditions for a long time, particularly when you look at how much the glaciers have receded. And I was up there on the lake and could see that, and it was explained to us how much they dropped in 20 years and where they projected it. So we ain't going to have enough water for power, electricity, so it's a big thing for government and local bodies to look at. So get the water meters in smart. They don't have to be used straight away, but other parts of the country are already using them, and they put a cap on people and you pay an extra if you go over that. So it's nothing to be frightened of, but if it's done early enough, hopefully we'll keep that in check. I also suggest perhaps there should be working groups between plumbers. You hear various stories when they're connecting things up. The pipes that they're connecting to are in pretty bad condition. Maybe some reporting by plumbers over this could indicate which areas are going to fail and can be dealt with before they do. So that was one. Two, the council's position on the elderly person housing concerns me. That the council, from what I gather, I think they've been selling off houses or ones that can't be upgraded are just going to be not used. I think councils, as I put there, should have a responsibility for vulnerable residents. I mean, none of us ever want to end up in those situations, but some people do. Now, one of the cases I've heard of, and it can be confirmed or whatever, is that places like Friendship Lane, because of the design, you can't upgrade them for insulation and things like that, so they could be pulled down. To me, that would be, when there's such a housing shortage in the country, that would be, that's criminal. Could be used for emergency housing. Hell of a lot of us with the same colour hair as me grew up in houses that absolutely had no insulation, and we all survived with ice on the windows. What's wrong with the younger generation? They're just getting so bloody weak. However, that's on that point. Now, you only asked us for 3 questions, and then I realised I had a lot more than 3 to put in there.
That's okay.
So I'll go into sort of the order that I've got there. The 3A was to do with stock water, which I've already heard a little bit on. I've put in submissions on this before, and I'm now pleading that you take notice of what's happened. The ecosystem will be lost without all these stock water races. Again, people that are older than us, and there's not many around, would come to these meetings, but would forget what Canterbury was like before those were put in. And it was just bare land. Roger, your family, you're nodding, and things only worked when they got those going. If you lose that, you lose the ecosystem, the fish, someone's mentioned before, the birds, the insects, the whole ecosystem will be just gone. And I don't think that people realise or they're starting to in recent years, the valuation of bees to the district. Now, we've been looking for a slogan in this town, and I always thought that Ashburton, the grain and seed capital of New Zealand, would be as good as any. But without that the ecosystem with the bees, that will all be at risk, at very high risk, because people don't think that bees need water. They do. And then I've heard people say, well, there's plenty of stockwood around with all the dairying and such. Bees just drown in that sort of water. They need microscopic drops off the edges of streams. They sit on the leaves. They don't go into the water. And I know this because my dad was a beekeeper for 50 odd years. But it will be, once it's gone, it'll be so hard to replace. What I can't understand also is when I was farming, they were against some of the water races because they said there was too much loss. The water was just not getting right down to the bottom. I don't think it was ever intended to get down the bottom. But, with stock using it, it was always going to get depleted. And sure, there was a lot lost. But to me, that was another way of recharging the aquifers. And that was happening. And now, of course, with all the closures, we won't have that natural recharge from those. And we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these managed aquifer recharge sites. Now, I'm not knocking that. That's helping, proving, but it's a hell of a lot of money when we've got something that's there, and all it needs is those stockwater races to be kept clear and clean. And we've did it for bloody decades. So why get rid of them? I cannot understand why that. So please, reconsider that. Now the infrastructure part, which I've got there, I fully support what the councils do, and it's great. Other towns have got behind in water, wastewater and sewerage, and they're in dire trouble, as we know, in different parts of the country. So congratulations on keeping that up to date. And I don't think any ratepayer would complain about continuing spending on that side of it. Now, where did I go from here? Sorry, it's a bit jumbled.
Second bridge, I think.
Yes, the second bridge, thank you. Well, I think you all know my views on that, and we got nowhere the last one. One of the concerning factors, though, I heard in one of the reports, was that all things were brought up for the reviews and the studies, including the bypasses. And I will know that is not true. The bypasses that the Bridge Action Group put up were never included. And that was really a lost chance, because the majority of the population were in agreement with it. There were two sites that, firstly, the Malcolm Street, West Street, came up as a very popular idea, very sensible place for low cost, but obviously council and Opus and everyone at that time did not want it, because they put up all the hurdles about you can't build another bridge close to another one, and the big sweeping curves at the end of the district were built for 100k limits instead of a 50 or 60k limit. So all those things went against it. They didn't want it. Obviously, people are now getting very upset it's going to go down the middle of the road again, because it will never solve the problem that we've got in terms of the through traffic. So if they won't fully fund it, and they're going to fully fund something on State Highway 1 and West Street, that will still be a medium term, 10 year, 15 years problem will solve it. Long term, they're still going to have to look at a bypass at some point. And possibly by then, maybe other roads can come into play, because the one that the Bridge Action Group put up would be unlikely to be able to succeed when there's housing being built in some of those areas already, and now making it more difficult for the site they chose. So there are other options. But at the moment, if money's so tight with the way the government are just splashing it around, I guess we can not hope for a ring road at this point, but I never say never. But if the case for that was put down Malcolm Street, it makes a great improvement for one other problem that you've got there, and that's the access from the east. And having lived on that side for some time, it's getting, and I still visit there regularly because we've got friends, of course, and family, and it's just a matter of, it's getting harder for those people on that side, and their values of their property, I've been told, have been declining or making it harder to sell, like everything else has been going up, because of that access. And for the elder people, it is quite dangerous the way it is, and something has to be done for that Timberwold corridor. So the bridge going down Malcolm Street would solve that effectively. It's just reducing that traffic in half. It's not exactly half, but it's going to take through traffic on one side plus local, and it'll open up Archibald Street through as being the local road for all local traffic. So it's still currently the best value for money, and then maybe they can start planning for a ring road or bypass later in the piece. The last piece on my list there was the Timberwold traffic lights. Again, I'm saddened at the local input. I know you didn't even put it in your piece here because you said it's an NZTA issue because it's an NZTA road. And I can't understand why council and local people can't have enough, can have some input on these projects just to get them right. Most people agree that's completely in the wrong place to have it there. The problem, that won't help a great deal for the cars getting onto the east. And to think you're going to divert traffic then that's coming up from Graham's Road through those residential areas to come up with a set of lights, just beggars belief is that no one can come up with that. It can only happen because it was done, I guess, by someone in Christchurch and Wellington and the NZTA who looked at a map and says, oh, there's the place to put it. That's what we'll do. And as you get the prices that were quoted before, having traffic lights in conjunction with railway lines, is a horrendous price. And for a fraction of that, we can have a roundabout into Graham's Road, which keeps traffic flowing. They work everywhere else in the country. Again, I can't understand why they're taking them out. Taken one out of Havelock Street in our local town, and since then there was a couple of smashes in the first few weeks. So, and I don't know when the last time there was one there, probably quite a long time. But they're the modern way of getting traffic around, and people can access it. It's a slight gap in the traffic when they just merge together, and that's Timberwold. The issue has to stay on the plans because it's really making it difficult. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, as I've only put in it briefly there, but it's going to need some lights for pedestrians, so somewhere around the Timberwold shops, so that school children, those who actually walk or bike to school, probably very few now, they all seem to be driven there by their parents, but they still need access across there. But that just operated when at the busy times of the day when the kids are crossing the schools, shouldn't impair the traffic too much. And but putting a traffic lights at Lagmore Road would be a huge mistake. And there's only one fuel stop site now there, that Timberwold Z place. And I don't see their business surviving if you put lights in there, because the access would be totally knackered. So if you want to wipe that side of a service from that side of town, you're really not doing that side of the South Tyne a lot of favours. So I did attach another point to the NZTA. Did everyone get that?
Yeah, we got that.
Right. So I wasn't sure whether how much they would put of those submissions. Do they send those submissions back to you, the ones they received, or?
Not to us. The NZTA have run their own consultation process on that. They had an open day over in Timberwold about it, but and they took feedback on then from the general community, and they presented to council what they want to do. As you say, it's their road, so they do their consultation on it.
Yeah, but
that's all, Dave. Thanks so much. We can go to questions. And I have one question. You said property values were declining over there. That would be against the trend of the whole country. Have you got evidence to show that those property values are declining, or is it just hearsay?
That was hearsay before, obviously, things have gone up. But from what I gather, they haven't risen as much as other parts. And they've, from someone like Roger might be able to answer that because he's not long out of the business, but I believe they were more difficult to sell because of that.
Thanks for that clarification. That's good. Councillors, any questions of Dave? A very good, thorough submission. Answered a lot of questions, I think, in there. So, no, thanks very much, Dave, and we'll get back to you.
Maybe a miracle.
It was. Very well done. Thank you. Councillors, next up, we have Furrowed Farmers. I see David Clark there, page 197. Dave, welcome.
Well, good morning, Neil Brown, Mayor Brown, and councillors, Chief Executive Andrew and staff. My name's David Clark. I'm Federated Farmers Provincial President for Mid-Canterbury, and welcome the opportunity to come along and talk to you about our submission. An apology from Dr. Lionel Hume, who authored our submission. He's unable to be here, but I'm certainly able to cover the topic in his absence as well. So Federated Farmers Mid-Canterbury has just under 800 members, 795 members, so we represent a large portion of the farming community here in Mid-Canterbury, a subscription-based organisation that's voluntary for farmers to join Federated Farmers, and I would ask that the views in our submission be taken as the views of the wider Federated Farmers membership. As there's been ample opportunity for those members to have their input into what are our views being presented to you today. So, first of all, if we look at the rate rise increases at 4.6%, we do congratulate the Ashburton District Councillors in showing more financial prudence than your big brothers up the road in Christchurch. But we would also remind you that at the moment, the CPI is running at about 1.5%, so you're still operating at a level 3 times above the inflationary aspects that other businesses within New Zealand are running at. So we would encourage you to always be looking at sensible and responsible cost control across the business. A UAGC is something that our members always hold dear as a very fair way of charging for activities that benefit people. So there's some concepts around rating that I'm sure you're all well aware of. That a property rate is a rough and ready way of estimating the scale of a business activity or an asset footprint across Mid-Canterbury, and we would encourage councillors to always remember that the recovery of cost of activity should always fall to the people that benefit it. So activities that benefit asset owners in the district should be charged through property rates or targeted rates, but then social activities we think should be covered or should be funded by UAGCs. So if there's equal opportunity for access to social activities or social facilities within the community, we feel that the community all should pay for that equally, on a per head basis or a per household basis rather than some assumed value of property. Because when you're looking at property, particularly farm values, it's an arbitrary value that has been guessed by Quotable Value New Zealand, and it's somewhat irrelevant if the asset is not for sale and is an intergenerational asset not for sale. That assumed value is somewhat arbitrary and somewhat irrelevant in our view. So if we go through the individual items within the long-term plan, with social housing, look, we encourage you and endorse the social housing policy, and we feel that the housing that council provide for social need within the community should be up to standard, should meet with Healthy Homes criteria, and should be at rents that are sustainable for that asset to be maintained in the long term. And that, I guess, can fit in with the social assistance that people may be able to get to help with those rents as well. But any shortfalls that fall upon the ratepayers, once again, we feel that they should be funded by a UAGC rather than by a property rate, because we don't think that is falling to where the benefit is. So we would encourage, at 24% UAGCs across the district with a cap of 30, we feel that you're underusing the UAGC provisions within the Rating Act. We would congratulate you on being part of the CBD revitalisation, and I think we're going to have a good looking town in the future. It's good to see some concentrated effort with the CBD in one area of the town and away from Highway 1. So whilst we don't want to see the council become a property developer or sink a whole lot of our rates money into such activities, we do congratulate you on being part of the revitalisation of that area of the town. With water meters, we believe that water meters should be fitted to properties. We in the rural areas are expected to have water meters on our wells so we can keep track of compliance across our business, and we don't see any difference for the council. And I think it's also very important for leaks within the system to be identified, just as it is for us as farmers. If we have leaks within our system, we're actually non-compliant with our consent. So we're encouraging of that. We think it's vitally important that the council exercise cost control just like any other business across Mid-Canterbury and across all of society. You are here in a governance role, and council is a big business, but it's a business that you need to exercise careful control of. The roading contract, you've had a change. Let's hope it's a change for the good. But I guess we'd look back at years of roading maintenance and wonder who signs off the cheque at the end of the month. In my business, if the job doesn't get done properly, the person doesn't get paid. So when there's a pothole, and the pothole's been there for 10 months, and every 3 days somebody comes out and stands the sign up next to the pothole again, if I was running the show, I would say that's not very well done. So I'd be very encouraging of council to ensure that their staff are administering the contract correctly. And with a new contractor, let's hope we're going to see value for money and an improvement on our roads, because some of our roads, as you all know, are in a very, very disappointing state, and it's going to take us a long while to dig ourselves back out of the pothole that we find ourselves in. We congratulate the council and particularly Mayor Brown for his involvement in the Bovis Advisory Group. Thank you for chairing that, Neil. It's been a very good initiative, so well done on that, and also the engagement that you've had and both Chief Executive and Mayor have had within the challenges that we face with the freshwater rules, and then going to Wellington to meet with Minister Parker. Well done for that. We think it's very important to have council involved in the topical issues in the district and having a long-term view to where we're heading as a district. Second bridge we see as vitally important for this district. It doesn't have to be now a rugby game in Dunedin or Christchurch or a Fleetwood Mac concert in Dunedin for there be a snarl up that goes to Winslow to the Drumore corner just about. You can now actually see that sometimes on a weekday afternoon. Even if you were all to push the big green go button on a second bridge today, my bet is it would be 10 years before we can drive across that bridge. It's a long time away. And if we look back over successive councils that have kicked the can down the road, we've now got a community in the district that is facing Auckland-style traffic jams some afternoons. So we would be very encouraging of you to bring the second bridge to the front of your mind and work very hard on NZTA, because it's our view that that is as much an NZTA bridge as it is a local bridge. Because if you look at the traffic going up and down Highway 1, the traffic flows into Ashburton and out of Ashburton are still very high traffic flows, well beyond one bridge, one roundabout and 3 sets of lights. So we need to start thinking, what are you all thinking out there is going to look like in 10 years' time when you do commission the new bridge if you were to push the green button on it today? So you need to bring that to the forefront of your mind. But what's of concern is that the reason why you need to start and make a decision on the second bridge is to protect the corridor for it. Because if we look back on Ashburton, 25 or 30 years ago, we had a bypass and we had a corridor and it was called West Street. But what successive councils have done is allowed the retail development of this town to move on to West Street, which is now the reason why West Street can't be used as the second bridge pathway. A little bit of forethought in the past would have protected that. You could have sent State Highway 1 down West Street, over the river, down Malcolm Street, and away south again. So wherever you're planning to put the second bridge, you need to start and think about it now so that you don't find that you've boxed yourself into another corner in 10 years' time. So I guess that's my my prompt for the future, if we may, because it's vitally important that we get both people and freight moved through this district efficiently, and having freight trucks spending half an hour getting through Ashburton just adds to the cost of moving this district's product. And we also need to think about what would happen if something was to occur to the Ashburton Bridge as to how we move people and freight across this district. So it'd be very encouraging of that. So I guess that's it from us. Any questions?
Thanks, Dave. There's a few questions there. Just clarification for you say 24% UAGC. We are at 39%. We're 29.9%.
Right.
So your figures may be wrong, but we are at maxed out. If we did everything to UAGC, I think we'd be at 35, but we can't. So we've had to take some off UAGC and put it back on the general rate. So we're at the maximum.
I apologise. I think I've been wrongly advised, but I shan't throw Lionel under the bus. But yes, sorry.
It might have been the way you interpreted it, but anyway, that is the correct stance. The second bridge, we have programmed it as 26 is to be built. It's in the Regional Land Transport Plan, and it's supposedly at the end of Chalmers Ave. That was decided many years ago, and the land on the other side of the river has been designated for the bridge. So there was foresight if the Chalmers Ave road or crossing is to be used. So that is done. If it moved to West Street, don't know what it'll need there, but obviously it'll have a look.
I guess if I may reply, we're just concerned about some of the feeling that's coming out of central government and their reluctance to build roads, and I'm really concerned that predicted works could end up being held up or delayed or pushed out.
Let's hope not, but let's take your point on board. Well done. We'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Morning, David.
Good morning.
My question is, our roading rates are on property values.
Yes.
What would rural ratepayers consider if we had to fund at 50% the second bridge? At the moment, we've laid down a policy of 20% local rates, 30% progressive rate funding, 51% NZTA. If we can't get any other funding apart from 50% NZTA, would the rural community who pay 75 or 80% of the roading rate at present be prepared to fund a second bridge at that sort of rate?
They would be reluctant to, but I think people recognise the fact that this community needs a second bridge. So I guess in response, we're encouraging council to push for the best deal you possibly can, so that the highest percentage of that bridge falls upon funding from one way or another out of central government.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go through it.
How can we hold at the rate of inflation if we're going to do something like that?
That will need to be funded. That capital work would need to be funded out of borrowing. Would be the only way to smooth the rate burden of that capital development out over future years, in our view.
And if that happened, the interest would obviously be over and above CPI.
Yes, yeah. So, look, I recognise it's difficult. The bridge is going to be very expensive, whoever pays for it. But I think there's a realisation too that the bridge is going to be needed, because if we look forward into the future, we're going to have a snarl up in this county.
And Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to ask, what are your thoughts on a toll road? Do you think that would work through or not?
The fairest way of funding a roading network is the tonnes carried per kilometre. So the road user charges system works extremely well. I guess the task is to ensure that the road user charges income that's earned in mid-Canterbury or wherever is then returned back to mid-Canterbury. And effectively that's a toll road that falls upon the people who are using it. I mean, it's a wonderful system. Toll roads wear out on tonnes carried per kilometre, and they're charged for on tonnes carried per kilometre in road user charges. It's a wonderful system. But we've just got to make sure that trucks that are running in mid-Canterbury, that income is being returned to mid-Canterbury to the roads that they wore out in their activity.
Councillors, any further questions? If not, thanks Dave for your presentation on behalf of Federated Farmers. It's well done.
Great,
We'll
thanks
get
very
back to you after we've deliberated and let you know the outcomes of the plan. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Great. Councillors, we've got up to contingency time and we're going to change chairs at this time too. So Councillor Braham can come into the hot seat. And the next one up is 11:30 with Edith Smith, Ashburton Community Conservation Trust. The glasses. So Edith is not here yet. So we'll running ahead of time, so we'll just take a wee break and we'll resume again at 11:30. Thank you.
We
Stop blinking. You're online.
we are online almost now. Councillor, the second session for today. We're getting towards the end, slowly. We've got Edith Smith talking on behalf of the Ashburton Community Conservation Trust, and you can find the submission on page 42. Edith, if you want to come up and speak to... This the one?
Yes.
Yeah, just leave it down.
I'm chairman of the Ashburton Forest and Bird, but I'm speaking in relation to the Ashburton Community Conservation Trust. And I'll just explain this. The Ashburton Community Conservation Trust was established in 2008. The trust deed specifies that the majority of trustees must be forest and bird members, and that the trust meetings must be chaired by the chairman of Forest and Bird. Part of the trust objects is to protect and restore natural vegetation in the Ashburton area. At that time, the District Council owned an 11.3 hectare property, including 2 hectares of a QE2 covenant site at 409 Lovetts Road, which was not suitable for the purpose it had originally been purchased for. A lease was drawn up between the Trust and the ADC with the objective of enhancing the existing QE2 covenant site and planting the other 9 hectares with vegetation typical of the area 150 years ago. The lease required the Trust to manage the property for at least 5 years from 2010. In the ensuing years, the trustees have acquired a great deal of knowledge about dryland biodiversity and the skills needed to develop the site as it appears today. Management plans were produced and were regularly reviewed, and this development has created opportunities for volunteers, community groups and schools to work at and identify with the reserve, and has required considerable management time and effort. This effort has extended to 13 years, considerably more than the 5 that were expected under the lease agreement. While the tenure of the Harris Scientific Reserve is unlimited, the planting programs are nearing their conclusion after 14 years. With this in mind, the trustees are considering theirs and the council's future role at the reserve. They would like to feel more confident about the future. They would feel more confident about the future if there was a permanent biodiversity officer ecologist appointed to the staff who would have the knowledge and experience needed to manage the significant dryland vegetation reserve. With that in mind, the trustees strongly advocate for the appointment of a biodiversity officer ecologist as advocated in the council's long-term plan. And while the Harris Reserve is a site where native vegetation is being restored and is open to the public and appreciated by the few people who visit, 409 Lovetts Road is quite out of the way for most. To bring the native biodiversity to the people is the key value of the recent domain development plan. And today we have a great opportunity to meet this value by creating a native garden in the former Avery area. This site could feature our district native plants and ecosystems in sequential plantings, starting from the alpine to the foothills, to braided rivers and to the plains and to the coast. These would be set in a natural landscaping suited for each of the 5 areas. The site would include attractive, informative panels along pathways to educate the public and the children about the Mid-Canterbury Biodiversity Officer, native biodiversity. An experienced biodiversity officer would lead a project such as this, and Ashburtonians and visitors alike would learn to appreciate our Indigenous biodiversity. And I've got a little example of this. This is a little plant which I'm going to donate to Councillor Lovett's garden. But but it seems insignificant. Councillors who travelled in the bus trip saw the remnant of this in the biodiversity hotspot on Ferryman's Road, barely visible. But if you go to the Atari Wilton Park in Wellington, as you step onto the pathway, there you will see our very own Muhlenbeckia Frodoides to view and see as a significant plant. And this is what I really would envisage in the domain, where people visit more readily and they would see and learn about these plants that we have very few of left on the plains. So I'll leave that there for you, Madam Chair of the Biodiversity Group, and I hope you enjoy it in your garden. Anyway, thank you.
Are there any questions? Would you like to answer any questions? Or if there are any questions? My question is, what is the value of the plant? What is the value of the plant?
What is the value of the plant?
Financially, because otherwise you might not have it if it is more than $50.
No, it's an under the table.
I won't mention that at all. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Edith. We've got Val and Nikki. Are you both standing? Want to come forward, or is it one by one? What is the easiest way to, ladies? Councillors, we've got 1 on 209, page 209, and the next one is 211, so one after the other. Thank you, ladies, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you again. I feel like a bad penny that keeps turning up, but however. And what I will show you relates mainly to the plains of the Ashburton district, but Forest and Bird does have concerns about the foothills and high country as well. And this photo is one of those iconic photos that we see looking from the Potts Cutting up towards the mountains. But I have been up there and swung around, and there's cattle in the Potts River between the bridge and the Rangitata, so you know, all is not that well in paradise. So I was thinking about what I would like you to take away from today. And my emphasis today is to highlight the state of our natural ecosystems by showing you examples of plants, a bird species in an area of significance that have all but been forgotten or ignored as the plains have been developed. And to do that, I have brought along my copy of the Biodiversity Strategy, which was set up in 2006, and it includes a number of councils and other organisations. And its vision statement aspires to a full range of healthy ecosystems stretching from the mountains to the sea. And there we have the Ashburton District Council first on the list. One point I would like to make is that many plans have been developed at considerable cost of time, energy and money, and to implement them takes resources and imagination and a sound knowledge. So every time a plan is written, they often get stuck on a shelf and there they sit. I'd urge you, if you're writing a plan, to be realistic, to put the resources behind it and to actually implement it. This is a wonderful plan, but, and there's always a but. Here are the goals. Protect and maintain the health of all significant habitats and ecosystems. That's a huge ask, but you guys signed up to it. And if these goals were being worked through, we wouldn't be in the perilous state that we are in now. As part of this plan, it shows this graph which is an illustration of generalised species-area relationship. So what it tells you is that if you have 100% Indigenous cover remaining, then you have an intact ecosystem. So you'll have the birds, the insects, the microbes, the whole ecosystem would be functioning. But as the Indigenous cover drops away, so does the proportion of species remaining. And I've put the red arrow in because I think that's where the Ashburton Plains natural ecosystems are sitting. Next to nothing. And if you think back to the graph, we have very little left, and some of the best areas have no recognition and almost no protection. So I've did a rough calculation that the plains of Ashburton cover about 275,000 hectares. It's been said, and it's said in the Ashburton Biodiversity Action Plan, less than 1% Indigenous vegetation remains on the Canterbury Plains. If we had 1%, we'd have 2,750 hectares of Indigenous vegetation. Well, we did a head-scratching exercise and came up with a list and think that we'd be lucky if we have got 55 hectares, which means we have 0.02% of the plains in original native vegetation. And most of those are single plants growing on roadsides or in amongst gorse, broom and exotic grasses. So they don't have much chance of reproducing. And I'd like to show you a couple of those places. This is one of Ashburton's biodiversity hotspots. And I think that most of you will recognise the sad-looking cabbage tree. But the grey shrubs around are also a native, Corokia cotoneaster. But look how badly infested it is with wilding pines and Scots broom. And this is one of the best bits. And this is up near the Rakaia, and there are hundreds of these very ancient kophi trees, hundreds of them. And this area has been grazed around, it's been cultivated around. There's no chance of regeneration for any of these trees, and there's very little protection of any sort. This is one of my favourite trees. And I think that this tree has been growing and then the river has come through and swept away maybe a metre of topsoil, and it's sitting up on props. And I love that these plants tell a story. They make our place unique and distinctive. Ashburton's being left behind as people all across New Zealand learn to treasure their native flora and fauna and are planting, tracking pests and restoring wetlands and creeks. Now, I don't want to talk too much about this next picture, but this is something I saw last Friday. And this is part of Wakanui Creek. A few years ago, this was a small creek meandering across the plains there with flax and cabbage trees and remnants of an intact ecosystem growing on it. And this is what it is today. However, just for something completely different, I'd like to show you some of our special plants. So this is an attractive plant with unusually for New Zealand, large flowers, which grows in one spot that we know of, down near the coast, about half a square metre, and it sits among hectares of gorse. And this is one of the council's best efforts, I guess. This is a little butterfly called Raupraha's copper, and it was named that because it was first described at Kaiapoi. And it's feeding on this attractive plant called shore bindweed, and it's one of 4 species of butterflies found at Wakanui when ADC funded an insect survey. And I have to say, one of the delights was taking Brian Patrick, the entomologist, along to Wakanui School, and he presented his report to the school kids at Wakanui. And that was an absolute delight, so thank you for funding that. And Edith showed you a Muhlenbeckia. So each of the 4 species lays their eggs on a different species of Muhlenbeckia or wireweed. And this is just another little point about the native vegetation. Well, not all of them, but a lot of the native plants have English descriptions like shore bindweed and wireweed. And, you know, that's all perspective again, isn't it? This little plant is called Crespedia Wakanui. There were 2 plants left in the wild, and there's one in captivity at Landcare Research. And the problem with those 2 plants at Wakanui was that they had to outcross. They couldn't self-pollinate. So one of them would flower, and then the other one would flower. And so their timing was out. And I don't know, is this the rarest plant in New Zealand? Quite possibly. There were 60 of these along the coast a few years ago in the 1990s. 4 remained when we started watching them, and now there are 2, and the one at Landcare Research in Lincoln. And this is a long and really complicated and interesting story, but we have taken pollen from these plants up to Lincoln, and pollen from Lincoln has been brought down to these plants at Wakanui, and we now have 100 purebred Crespedia Wakanui seedlings that have germinated. So quite exciting, that one. But, you know, a bit ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it? Another species found at Wakanui is the banded dotterel. These little birds, tiny, will breed at Wakanui if there's water in the lagoon, which there isn't very often. And they're delightful little birds which are becoming more and more endangered by the moment. There's quite a population of them at South Bay in Kaikoura, and last year 1 fledgling survived. And I mean, we can see why. Their little nests sit in amongst the shingle, and the eggs are about the size of a fingernail, and they're very hard to see even when you're looking for them, and certainly not when you're driving past them. So at Wakanui, the lagoon sometimes fills up with water, but very seldom these days. But it's one of those places that 4-wheel drivers like to go and challenge themselves and get stuck in there and then go crying up to the local farmer to come bring his tractor down and pull them out. And I love this photo on the bottom because there's the intersection of the vehicle tracks and the birds' footprints. And we all know who's winning that war. So I guess I'm issuing a challenge to you guys. And I know you've got 5,000 other things that you're challenged about, but you know, there you go. First of all, we need to protect the tiny remnants that still exist. And we need to find some ecologically sound and practical advice locally. And I know that there's a suggestion of a biodiversity officer, but that biodiversity officer needs to have some knowledge about the ecosystems that are around this district. Somebody from Auckland is going to have knowledge about a completely different set of ecosystems from what we have here. And finding adequate funding to really make a difference. This stuff isn't cheap to do, as we've found at Harris Reserve and other places. But the big one, I guess, which you particularly can help with, is changing attitudes. I'm not sure how we do this, but I think attitudes are changing now, and people are concerned about this sort of stuff. And one of the best ways to change attitudes is to get the kids involved. And the kids from Wakanui love going down to the beach. We have a lot of fun down there. They love putting in some work and then having a wander up the beach. Involving the community and telling the stories of our place by learning about and valuing our nature. We have stories here that don't get told about our biodiversity and our landscapes. You say to somebody from any other district, we've got all these dongas along the coast, and they look at you as if you're quite strange. So, you know, we have stories here that we can tell to enhance the character of this place. And you have made a difference at Wakanui, and you have the power to make the difference in other areas, so please accept the challenge. And the time is right. I think there's a groundswell of people who are concerned about their environment, and it's time to give something back to the land that has provided us with so very much. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil, and it's certainly a challenge. And I've been on the bus trip and I quite enjoyed it. But it's scary if you hear what you're saying. There's hardly anything left. Pardon me. Councillors, are there any questions for Phil? Neil.
Morning, Val, and welcome. Thank you for your submission. Just a question on the 0.02 or the 55 hectares. I notice a lot of farms now planting shelter belts with native species. I see a lot of them as I drive around.
Yes.
Have you included them in your 55 hectares?
No, I haven't. So my 55 hectares is original vegetation. And so the planting is wonderful, but it takes time for that full ecosystem to build up.
So they haven't been included yet?
No, we'll give them 100 years.
Very cool. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Hi, Val. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. First of all, the kōwhais down by the Rakaia River, I know you had some ideas of how you could protect those. Has that gone any further, or is that just at a sort of stalled phase at the moment?
It's been stalled at the moment, and we haven't given up on it, but there's still some negotiating and some work to do on that one. But I mean, it could be a wonderful asset for the district.
Yep, thank you. And my second question, if that's okay, do you think one biodiversity officer is enough?
Oh no, but we've got to start somewhere. I mean, we first suggested this more than 10 years ago, so we will be very happy to have one biodiversity officer, and then we'll come back and suggest you get another one.
Let's go for two. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thanks. Morning, ladies. Number 13, you talk in the climate change, your submission. You ensure the district is on a pathway towards an equitable future for generations to come. What do you mean by equitable future for generations to come?
Kia ora everybody, I'm Nikki. I haven't given my submission yet, but I will in a moment. Equitable future, I guess, is to future generations, so we're not sort of palming the problems of dealing with climate change onto the kids and the grandkids, that we have to start dealing with it now. That's an equitable future.
Oh, I see. I thought this was part of the same submission.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions for Val before we go to Nikki? No more? Oh, hold on, there's one coming in. Councillor Lovett. Stuart? Thank you.
Could I just make a comment? I think we're very lucky.
That's on. Oh, okay, sorry.
Just
yes.
very
Yep.
lucky we've got these two ladies looking at this for us for the future, and we're very grateful for the bus trip and letting us know what we have and haven't got and lost in our district.
Thanks, Lynette. I mean, doesn't it make such a huge difference to go and actually see these things apart from reading about them. So if any of you would like to go down and explore Wakanui with me, just let me know.
Thank you, Phil. Nikki.
Kia ora, Val. Fabulous work. Keep it up, both of you.
And it's page 211. It's following on from Phil.
Kia ora, everybody. My name is Nikki Snowdink, and I'm the Regional Manager for Forest and Bird for Canterbury and the West Coast. And I'm really here to speak in support of Val and Edith today. And I'll take the Forest and Bird submission as read. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. Your strategic priority of a balanced and sustainable environment, and on climate change. Forest and Bird generally supports your LTP, but in considering the strategic direction as set out in the LTP and the emphasis on the four well-beings, and especially on the notion of a balanced and sustainable environment, we are particularly surprised to not see more of a focus on climate change action and protection of Indigenous species. The long-term plan sets out the issues that climate change presents, but little in the way of action that the Council intends to take over the next decade, which in my view is a critical time to take action to address those issues and to provide for the equitable future for generations to come. You know, we've got a lot of issues that we're dealing with, that we have to deal with now, that we shouldn't really put off for the kids and the grandkids to deal with, and that's what I just want to be clear, that's what I mean about an equitable future. Forest and Bird acknowledges and supports your membership of the Mayoral Forum's Canterbury Climate Change Working Group and congratulates the Council on its climate change policy that you developed in 2019. That's really great. We urge you now to set aside adequate funding to establish some sort of climate strategy for the district, be that in your LTP or a separate strategy, that more clearly prioritises and integrates climate change action. This would demonstrate a true commitment to implementing your climate policy and to scrutinising all of Council's activities through a climate lens, and to address some of the issues that you have actually identified that climate change is presenting in the LTP. And this would be really helpful so you can ask yourselves, when it comes to making the big decisions for your district that affect the future of your communities, how is it actually going to achieve your climate change goals, or indeed the nation's or the region's climate change goals? So our ask to you is to set aside some funding for climate action so that the Ashburton district can do its fair share to help the individuals, communities, the region and New Zealand to meet its climate change obligation. On the strategic priority of a balanced and sustainable environment, you point out that the local government requires you to play a broad role in promoting the social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being in your communities, or otherwise known as the four well-beings. And this is often interpreted as a bit of a balancing act, and that's what I interpret from your strategic priority there, where economic well-being is balanced against environmental well-being. Below that strategic priority, the LTP says that you're actively going to support the health of the district's rivers, lakes and waterways, and our unique landscapes and Indigenous biodiversity are valued. It sets out a couple of measures of its success: resident satisfaction with the state of the district's environment and biodiversity, and resident satisfaction with Council's activity to care for the district's environment and biodiversity. I think you've heard today that from Edith and Val that, you know, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of policies, but not a lot of action. So satisfaction might be at a fairly low ebb on that point. Canterbury's Indigenous biodiversity, freshwater and the burgeoning nitrate situation with freshwater suggests that things are actually way out of balance. Nitrate pollution in particular is an increasingly serious issue for many Cantabrians, especially as they begin to discover their drinking water is undrinkable. Some Ashburton drinking water supplies are particularly vulnerable to the effects of intensive land use, and many of Canterbury's lowland rivers and streams and groundwater are now in a fairly perilous state. Today's freshwater issues are likely to be exacerbated by climate change and need urgent attention now. So I think some really hard conversations are needed to protect drinking water supplies and to protect and restore ecological health in the region's freshwater ecosystems, and also to implement the central government's essential freshwater package, the NPS for freshwater, the National Environmental Standards and Te Mana o Te Wai, which sets a sort of a hierarchy to protect the water body first, and then to provide for drinking water, and then economic uses third. I heard Mayor Sam Broughton of Selwyn District say last week on this point that there's a lot to be done, and I totally agree with Sam on that point. On freshwater, we strongly support your proposal to improve freshwater infrastructure and water use efficiency in the district. That really gets big thumbs up from us. However, we think much more needs to be done to improve the state of our rivers, streams and groundwater. So our ask to you on this note of freshwater is that in addition to the proposed work on the three waters, we ask that you prioritise, fund and resource RMA planning processes to implement the National Freshwater Package as quickly as possible, and to improve and safeguard freshwater resource for generations to come. On Indigenous biodiversity, as Val has explained, Canterbury's Indigenous biodiversity continues to slide into the abyss. We acknowledge your biodiversity action plan that you developed in 2017 and support the work of Bert and the Ashburton Biodiversity Advisory Group, many of whom are volunteers. They volunteer their time and expertise. We are concerned, though, that there is an over-reliance on volunteers and that the action plan itself actually overlooks the Council's legal obligation to protect and maintain Indigenous biodiversity. Forest and Bird totally supports ECAN's Biodiversity Champions program, and we acknowledge that Councillor Lynette is on that group. And that group, I understand, is designed to bring some consistency to biodiversity protection and maintenance across the region, so it's a really awesome initiative. The National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity will soon be gazetted, and this reinforces the Council's obligation to identify, map and protect significant natural areas in your district. This obligation has existed since the inception of the RMA in the early 90s, and it requires you to protect significant Indigenous biodiversity and maintain everything else. I understand that you guys have already identified areas of significant conservation value in your district plan. That's really great, and it provides an awesome baseline for an SNA survey, Significant Natural Areas Survey. The NPSIB reaffirms this obligation. So in our view, the obligation requires Council to engage the services of a suitably qualified ecologist to undertake a district-wide survey of significant natural areas, to map them and to list them in your district plan. In the Ashburton district, especially on the Lower Plains Ecological District, as you've heard from Val, any remaining Indigenous biodiversity is likely to meet the criteria for significant, including even single native trees and shrubs, regardless of their state of degradation. So our ask to you is to resource and fund the engagement of a suitably qualified ecologist to undertake a district-wide SNA survey, for you guys to undertake a plan change to have the SNA listed in the district plan, and strengthen the provisions to protect the SNAs and maintain the district's Indigenous biodiversity. Alongside the regulatory stuff, that boring stuff, strong incentives are necessary to support land occupiers who have SNAs on their properties. Forest and Bird strongly supports the recommendation by Edith and Val to employ a biodiversity officer, a suitably qualified in-house biodiversity officer. And we also understand that you do have an SNA as a biodiversity fund, that you increase that fund, and then the role of that person is to help advise landowners on how they can protect and maintain their significant natural areas. That's really an important component of supporting the regulatory stuff to get people to do the right thing. And a bit of money always helps. So yeah, that's what we would ask you to do, is really take that consideration of employing a biodiversity officer seriously, even after 10 years of banging on the table about it. Now's the time to do it. They're out there and people are really enthusiastic. There's a sort of a sea change to do this. One last thing I would like to touch on is biosecurity. Biosecurity, I think you have identified that in your long-term plan as a significant climate change issue. These risks will increase as climate change kicks in. We're already starting to see myrtle rust threaten things like species like pohutukawa, manuka and rata. Again, Forest and Birds is really supportive of Environment Canterbury's biosecurity advisory groups. And these groups are especially vital for having eyes and ears in the community for new biosecurity incursions. So this kind of goes hand in hand with your biodiversity stuff. Forest and Bird would encourage Ashburton District Council representation on the biosecurity advisory groups if you don't have it already, especially given the big agricultural dependency on the local economy, and just to keep in touch with what's going on in the community. It's really useful for that. So yeah, our ask to you is that ADC support and resource participation in the Mid-Canterbury ECAN biosecurity advisory groups.
I will stop you now. We've been going over a wee bit. So
that is my last point, and I just
okay.
want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
That's great, and thank you. And if I listened properly, we're going the right direction, but not fast enough.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, especially on the biodiversity stuff.
We've got some questions coming in, so we take them, go from there. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks for the submission. Just on point 16, just a bit of clarification around that, and I'll read it for those who haven't got it in front. We're concerned that ADC does not appear to have considered the implications, for example, of nitrate contamination in our drinking water supplies. We strongly recommend that ADC ensure there's adequate funding to tackle this issue during the lifetime of this LTP. What does it actually mean? What do you want us to do there?
Well, I just wonder if, if you are clear about what the risk is, and if you have alternative water supply for your communities identified.
Okay. We do test for nitrates in our drinking water supplies now.
Yeah.
And they're at at acceptable levels. But also we have the Managed Aquifer Recharge Project, MAR, which is looking at sorting the nitrate issues out in the plains. Are you in agreement with that strategy or not?
Well, not particularly. We would rather see probably, we think Managed Aquifer Recharge is a bit of a band-aid solution, to be honest. It's not actually a long-term solution. We need to sort of look at the land use and stop putting the nitrate on the land to begin with, and let the river and the aquifers recharge naturally. That would be our preferred approach.
Okay. And just on point 25, waste minimisation. We recommend an education program to further minimise waste to landfill and recycling. We do have an education program now as part of our waste management contract. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, yeah.
So what's this meaning then?
I feel like ramp it up. Yeah, ramp it up even higher, faster, and demand producers of the waste. We've got a massive waste issue, and we have, we've got legacy landfills out there as well, so we actually have to start, understanding the impact of that in the future, again, for an equitable future for future generations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. My question is in paragraph 15. You support the council supporting the government's Three Waters program. We don't know what it is yet. I mean, we haven't made up our mind. Nobody's made up our mind. How can you tell us to support it when you don't know what it is? We don't know what it is. The Cabinet hasn't decided what it is. How can we possibly support something we don't know what it is?
Well, I guess we have to just keep on, questioning it, following it. We've clearly got problems with water, water consumption, wastewater, all of those things. So I'm really pleased to see the government take the initiative on this. So we need to support them and promote more efficient use and conservation of our water resource. It's one of the most precious things that we have in New Zealand, and we need to do better with it. It's in a perilous state nationwide.
Last question, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. This is a really quick question, and it might be more for Val. Do we have a list of Indigenous or original species that should be planted in our district that is available to the wider public, so that, I mean, Neil just mentioned, you know, everyone's planting their native trees and plants, etc., but is there an actual list that we could say, why don't you plant Mullumbeka instead of something else?
No, there isn't, but Di Lucas and Lucas Associates have done one for the Selwyn district, which would, with a bit of input, could be to a large degree translated over to the Ashburton district. ADBAG is going to, the Biodiversity Advisory Group is holding a seminar in the winter, which will look at, which we're at the moment calling Planting Natives 101, which would give some advice about that sort of thing. But yes, it's badly needed, I quite agree. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies, for your submissions. We certainly will discuss it, and we'll come back to you in a couple of weeks after we've finished. Thank you for the submissions.
Thank you. Kia ora. All the best.
Mount Somers District Citizen Association, and Sarah sitting down the back, quite happily waiting. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, Mr Mayor and councillors. Firstly, on behalf of our citizens group, we'd really like to thank you all for the long-term plan submissions consultation process in the village. It was refreshing to be heard and to ask so many questions, so we thank you so much for that. So with the list that we've submitted from the citizens group, I just want to identify a couple of points to speak about. One of the repetitive things that keeps coming up is about the zoning of land within the village, and that in the long-term plan we need to look at perhaps rezoning the land to smaller section sizes. We're on the grow, as you know, and not everybody, a lot of people want to have the tiny houses in the smaller section, you know, the quarter acre or even smaller. So we'd like that to be considered for the future with land in and around the village. It's also been brought up about land developers potentially having shared septic services as another way to bring together resources if the sections are smaller. One of the biggest things that's affecting us right now is the speed submission process. So we'd like to thank you for completing the process within the village, getting all the speeds to a consistent 50 kilometres. You can see it's made a difference with the children. We've got kids everywhere on bikes, and it's been wonderful. So we really thank you for doing that so quickly. The issue that's occurring now is the speed of 100 kilometres on Arundel-Rakaya Gorge Road through the village. Currently, truck and trailers are actually ramping up the speed as they go through instead of even slowing down. So last week I witnessed a child across the road, a ball went over the fence, a little one came out to get it, older sibling came out, truck and trailer went flying past, the trailer on the back swung onto the verge on the road. I swear they were doing 120. Older sibling quickly yanked the little one back, and I thought, no, we can't continue if they're going to increase the speed through there rather than slowing down. So
I've noticed Mayfield has been reduced to 60 kilometres in the township. So we originally asked for 70 to match Mayfield, but I think for continuity for travellers, it's important to keep it the same. So we'd asked for that to be reviewed to 60 kilometres. We also have the issue of safe turning bays into Ashburton Gorge Road, Pattons Road and Hoods Road. And right now, after discussions, we've realised that the main priority is to get the speed reduced as quickly as possible and then look at those turning bays. So I read in the paper that the second round of the speed process is underway, and I didn't see us listed on that for this. So I'm not sure of the process involved if we can hurry this up just to get the speed reduced. Potentially before you hit the village, so that when people actually enter the village, they're doing the 60 kilometres. Yeah.
You take questions, or you've got any more to add?
I've got nothing more to add on that particular one. Yeah.
Councillors, I will take 2 questions. Councillor Falloon is the first one.
Thank you for your submission. Just wondering, what is the aim of a dark sky quality survey?
Oh, yes, right. So we're aware right now that New Zealand is actually at the forefront with the dark sky policies that are occurring, with Aoraki, Mount Cook and the Mackenzie Basin also being included in a 4,300 kilometre dark sky reserve. So it's been...
Sorry, Sarah, might have just stopped it there, because I think Jono is the one who's going to talk about it later on. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, we're both, yes.
Okay, so we hear it twice, or is it only Jono who's going to talk about that?
I've got some stuff just to add about it as well.
That is part of your submission as well, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
So it was brought to our attention in the village that this would be a wonderful concept. We've had people going up the Ashburton Gorge to stargaze through their equipment. And we're aware along the foothills that particularly up the gorge and through Mount Somers is there's no light pollution. So it was something that was brought to mind that through town planning you could have the current lights with little caps on so the light doesn't point upwards. We thought it would create a very unique experience along the foothills and further support tourism within the district, as it could be a special feature for travellers and tourists alike to freely enjoy and experience open-air stargazing without the big price tags involved and the continuity of travelling through the South Island.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I refer to page 415, which is the submission that Sarah has spoken about, and I refer to number 3, if I may. And my question to Sarah is, why should we look at doing a survey? Should we not just go straight to a draft lighting management plan for the lights tilted the way you suggest?
This is where Jono comes in. He's got the technical information.
It's in your
on
submission, that's why I asked.
Yes. My understanding is due process is to do the survey first. That's, yeah.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And got 3 questions. Point 11, you support appointing a townsman for mowing lawns, checking stormwater drains, etc., and use the current domain staff to assist with this. Have you asked the current domain staff if they would do that?
I believe that the chairperson of the domain board has spoken with that person and they very much would like some more work.
Okay, because I think we probably have a contractor who does it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the issue was mainly that we get irregular grass growth in the spring and whatnot, so somebody on hand can keep it under control.
The point number 12, playground equipment from 12 months old to 5 years old.
Yes, sorry about that. I should have just written under fives.
Under 5, yeah.
Yeah, it's come to our attention that there is no public playground equipment for under fives within the village. Yeah.
And support, point number 13, support on the Village Green Information Station. What support did you want?
Right, so financial. So pretty much what's occurred early in February, we've applied through the Ashburton District Council Natural and Built Environment Community and Infrastructure Grant. We need, essentially the build of the building is around $92,000. We only require $40,000. We've managed to source volunteer labourers and materials and such. So that would be building the structure, and then in order to fit it out with all the information panels and the dock maps and everything inside, we've been quoted $45,000 to $50,000 for a Wellington company that does all of Christchurch to come and, create that. There'll be about 24 boards, and it's meant to be an education area, explaining everything about the flora and fauna and the development of the whole area and the history. It's a hub. So it's also designed to have buses and school groups come out and be able to all fit in there and have that resource.
Have you got a little bit more information on exactly what you want on that project?
Yes, I do. I could email it to you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
No more questions here. Is there anything you want to say, Sarah? Or yeah?
No, that's everything.
That's it?
Yeah.
Then I say thank you for your submissions.
Thank you.
And we shall certainly talk about it and get back to you in a couple of weeks.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you for that. Sarah. Now, Jono, your turn. Bring us to those dark places.
Yeah.
That is on page 457. 457.
Well, thanks to the Mayor and councillors for hearing me this afternoon. And apologies if I seem ill-prepared. I actually have had some other priorities. There's a few things I would have liked to have done. First, one of them is to talk to the Canterbury Astronomical Society, who have been a little bit involved in this area, but I haven't managed to do that yet, at least. I'll start off with a wee parable. I grew up in the Rakai Gorge up between Mount Hutt Station and Blackford Station. So where I slept, I was about 100 metres from the tussock and Matagari and cabbage trees and, a lot of biodiversity. So that was, middle childhood, I guess, primary school. Then by the time I left school, that was turned into a couple of kilometres of broad acre and pasture. So all of that landscape was gone. But people used to visit us and they'd marvel at our water, which just came out of the creek behind the house, and say how sweet it was and we should bottle it and sell it. And of course we all sort of said, how ridiculous, who'd ever buy water in a bottle? So I think that illustrates, how resources can be quite fragile and you can be completely take them for granted until they're under threat, and then you sort of, by that stage it's too late. And I would see the dark sky in a similar light. Just to so on the farm there, that I've sort of spent most of my life climbing and tramping and skiing in the Southern Alps. And I've worked in the mountains and at sea and in South Westland, but I've never seen sky like we used to see on the farm. And not every night, but you know, on particularly clear night, it would just be so three-dimensional that, you know, you actually felt vertigo looking up into it because it just looked like deep space, I guess. So, you know, those kind of experiences are quite rare. And it's amazing how many people I've guided people in South Westland, and some of them have grown up in cities and basically grew up without ever seeing a star. So, you know, a view of the night sky is actually very precious to some people. When I lived in Little River, I could see the glow of Christchurch very clearly in the sky at night. So, you know, it's not a local thing. That Staveley camp, I know for at least the last 3 years and possibly longer, they've had the Stardate event, which is Canterbury Astronomical Society, and possibly New Zealand as well, where they have 60 or so amateur astronomers and professional astronomers all gather there, and I guess some of them probably stay there. And they have a weekend of stargazing. So obviously that area has got some credibility as an area for astronomy already. And so I kind of think that at the very minimum that should be on the council's radar as having some responsibility to protect the amenity that they're using there. I think, you know, the submission referred to Mount Somers, but really I think it's you know, something that can be applied more broadly. So I think maybe Lake Clearwater would be a place that would be worth. This is why the quality survey is quite important, to identify areas. You know, there's a range. I mean, you don't want to try and turn Ashburton into Lake Tekapo, but if there's places that are where the night sky is under threat and it's, you know, not beyond saving, then that's probably where the focus should be. I was just going to mention the Oxford Area School has an observatory, which is actually the main observatory in Canterbury now. The Canterbury University use it for their astronomy courses, and they go out there to look at the sky. And the Astronomical Society have been looking at a dark sky policy for Oxford over the last couple of years, which is something I would have liked to have got more detail on for this. So, I mean, it's not really just about international tourism. I think there's a lot of local interest in this stuff as well. So in my submission, I mentioned, sorry, I ran out of toner on my printer. So the dark sky quality survey was one thing, which, you know, so it's basically, that's what it is, a survey to identify these, what the situation is now. A draft lighting management plan, I think, you know, that's a longer term thing, but I think it's just a document that should be in place, you know, somehow. And there's a few different guidelines that could be used for that. I've mentioned guidelines for outdoor lighting in the design process for lighting. I think that's something that could be put into place quite quickly, not as a formal obligation, but just as another document in the design process.
Can I stop you there? You've got all the information on here.
Yeah.
Can I ask for questions for councillors before we finish this off? Are there any questions? Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The cost of a dark sky survey, do you know what it would cost?
Well, there's a unihedron sky quality meter. You know, there's different, you can do qualitative surveys relatively subjectively. Like the most basic one is, can you see the Milky Way? And that gives you a dividing line between, you know, poor quality and, you know, less poor. But the sky quality meter, which you can buy for $120 US, I thought possibly the council could buy one of those and use it in a similar manner to a sound level meter that's sometimes lent to residents, so that, you know, someone like me could borrow it for a month or two and do a survey around Mount Somerset.
So that's my next question is if you mentioned the meter, which is $120 US, which is not a lot of money, and would the astronomy club people, if we had a meter and lent it to them, they'd be able to do the survey and give it to us already done? Is that something that could happen?
Yeah, I think there'd probably be enough interest that if you provided the equipment, people would do it. Because the other thing about it is that you need certain conditions. You need a clear sky and a moonless night and all that kind of stuff to do the measurements. So, you know, for someone from the council to do it, they'd be driving all over the countryside, sort of trying to get the right conditions. Whereas if someone was living there, be more likely to happen.
And the council staff generally work in daylight hours. So.
Oh, do they? I thought they.
We try to. John, I will thank you for your submissions.
That's all right. I
and
think.
Sorry, is there?
Sorry.
Okay, there's one more question from Diane before we go to lunch.
Thank you, and I do appreciate what you're saying, having stayed in a hut at the back of Erewhon where there's beautiful windows and no curtains, and I appreciate what you're saying, but in the longer term, do you see this perhaps morphing into a mini tourism?
Yeah, I think definitely. One of the things, I've got a few more notes I haven't gone through here, but I don't really need to, but one of the things I thought I'd mention is that, and the survey would come into this, it's a lot easier to get back from somewhere that's close to good than to let things slide to the point where it's impossible. You know, it's the same thing with water quality or biodiversity and everything. If you get so far behind that it's hopeless trying to get back. So you know, if in 20 or 30 years there was interest, say up at Lake Clearwater or somewhere, to have a dark sky reserve, it'd be a lot easier to get that in place. You know, if people have been thinking about it for the last couple of decades. So you know, I think that'd be something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, councillors. We will get back to you for a couple of weeks after all the discussions we will have.
Yep.
And thank you for being here.
I might have a bit more info by then.
Councillor, this is the lunch break. We will be back at 1 o'clock. And I'll see you then. Enjoy your